The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble steps of the ancient library where Marcus had spent countless hours studying the works of history's greatest thinkers. Today, however, he wasn't seeking answers in dusty tomes, but reflecting on his own journey of transformation. 3 years ago, he had been a different man entirely, uncertain, seeking validation from others, and constantly second-guessing his own worth. The change hadn't happened overnight, but through a systematic approach to rebuilding himself from the ground up. The concept of destroying one's weak self to become indestructible by others isn't about aggression or domination in the way many might interpret it. Rather, it's about the profound psychological transformation that occurs when an individual takes complete responsibility for their own development, emotional state, and life trajectory. This transformation creates a kind of psychological immunity to the opinions, manipulations, and emotional volatility of others. Marcus remembered his former self vividly. The man who would check his phone obsessively for responses to text messages, who would modify his opinions based on who he was speaking with, who would feel his mood crash when someone seemed disinterested or critical. That version of himself was like a leaf in the wind, constantly buffeted by external forces beyond his control. The weak self is characterized by external validation dependency, emotional reactivity, and decision-making based on fear rather than principle. The destruction of this weak self begins with a fundamental shift in perspective about where one's worth and security originate. Instead of seeking these externally, the process requires turning inward and building an unshakable foundation based on personal principles, competence, and self-respect. This isn't about becoming cold or disconnected from others, but rather about developing such a strong sense of self that external circumstances cannot destabilize your core. The first pillar of this transformation involves developing what could be called emotional sovereignty, the ability to maintain your emotional state regardless of how others respond to you. Marcus learned this lesson painfully during his early career when he would become anxious and reactive whenever his supervisor seemed critical or when colleagues appeared to exclude him from conversations. He realized that by allowing others to dictate his emotional state, he was essentially giving them power over his well-being and decision-making capacity. Emotional sovereignty doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb or disconnected. Instead, it means developing the ability to experience emotions fully while not being controlled by them, and especially not being controlled by other people's emotions or reactions. This skill becomes particularly important in interpersonal relationships, where emotional reactivity can create cycles of drama, conflict, and instability. The development of emotional sovereignty requires consistent practice in observing one's own reactions without immediately acting on them. When someone says something that would normally trigger anger, hurt, or anxiety, the emotionally sovereign person notices the feeling arising but maintains enough space between the stimulus and their response to choose how to react. This isn't suppression, it's conscious choice. Marcus discovered that this practice naturally led to what others perceived as confidence and strength. Women, in particular, seemed drawn to his newfound stability, not because he was playing games or employing manipulation tactics, but because emotional stability is inherently attractive to people who may be dealing with their own internal chaos or who have experienced relationships with emotionally reactive partners. The second pillar involves developing genuine competence and skill in areas that matter to you. The weak self often tries to fake confidence or competence, leading to anxiety about being found out or exposed as inadequate. The transformed self, however, builds real skills and knowledge, creating genuine confidence based on actual ability rather than pretense. This competence isn't just professional or technical. It encompasses physical fitness, social skills, emotional intelligence, creative abilities, and practical life skills. Marcus spent months learning to cook well, not because he thought it would impress anyone, but because he recognized that being able to nourish himself and others properly was a fundamental adult competency he had neglected. The process of skill development does something profound to one's psychology. Each new competency acquired sends a message to your subconscious mind that you are capable of growth, adaptation, and mastery. This creates a positive feedback loop where challenges become opportunities for growth rather than threats to your self-image. Women, like all people, are naturally attracted to competence, not the performative kind that seeks validation, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can handle whatever life presents. This attraction isn't superficial. It's based on the recognition that a competent person is more likely to be a stable, reliable partner who can contribute meaningfully to a relationship. The third pillar involves developing a clear set of personal principles and values, and then consistently living by them regardless of social pressure or convenience. The weak self is often unprincipled, shifting positions based on what seems most likely to gain approval or avoid conflict. This inconsistency is not only internally destabilizing, but also immediately apparent to others, creating an impression of unreliability and weakness. Marcus spent considerable time identifying his core values: integrity, continuous growth, genuine care for others' well-being, and the pursuit of excellence in whatever he undertook. These weren't abstract concepts, but practical guides for decision-making. When faced with choices, he would ask himself which option best aligned with these principles, regardless of what others might think or what seemed easiest in the moment. This principled approach naturally creates boundaries, not the artificial, defensive kind, but natural limits that arise from knowing what you will and won't accept in your life. These boundaries aren't announced with fanfare, but are simply evident in how you conduct yourself. People quickly learn what they can expect from you and what behaviors you won't tolerate. The effect of this principled living on interpersonal relationships, particularly with women, is profound. Many people, especially those who have experienced relationships with inconsistent or unprincipled partners, find principled behavior both refreshing and attractive. There's a sense of safety that comes from knowing someone will behave consistently according to their stated values, rather than according to mood or convenience. The transformation process also requires what might be called social independence, the ability to be alone without desperation and to engage socially from a position of choice rather than need. The weak self often approaches social interactions, particularly romantic ones, from a position of scarcity and neediness. This desperation is universally unattractive because it signals to others that you view them as a solution to your internal problems rather than as a person worthy of genuine interest and respect. Marcus learned to genuinely enjoy his own company, to pursue interests and hobbies that brought him satisfaction regardless of whether others shared them, and to build a life so fulfilling that others would be an addition to it rather than a necessity for it. This shift from need-based to choice-based social interaction changes everything about how others perceive and respond to you. When you approach relationships from abundance rather than scarcity, you naturally become more selective, more relaxed, and more genuinely interested in others for who they are, rather than what they might do for you. This authentic interest and lack of desperation is incredibly attractive because it's so rare. Most people are so focused on what they can get from social interactions that encountering someone who seems genuinely content and interested without agenda is refreshing and magnetic. The weak self is also characterized by approval-seeking behavior, constantly trying to say the right thing, present the right image, and avoid any possibility of disagreement or rejection. This people-pleasing behavior is exhausting for both the person doing it and those on the receiving end. It creates relationships based on false premises and prevents genuine connection because the real person never emerges from behind the carefully constructed facade. The transformation involves learning to express your authentic thoughts, feelings, and preferences even when they might not be popular or well received. This doesn't mean being needlessly controversial or insensitive, but it means being genuine rather than calculated in your self-expression. Marcus discovered that people respected him more when he politely disagreed with them than when he simply nodded along with whatever they said. This authenticity creates what might be called polarization. Some people will like you more, and some will like you less, but everyone will have a clearer sense of who you actually are. This is initially uncomfortable for those accustomed to trying to please everyone, but it ultimately leads to much stronger and more meaningful relationships with those who genuinely appreciate your authentic self. In romantic contexts, this authenticity is particularly powerful because it eliminates the exhausting game playing that characterizes so many modern interactions. When you're genuinely expressing yourself rather than trying to create a particular impression, others can relax and be authentic in return. This creates the foundation for real connection rather than the superficial attraction based on false impressions. The process of destroying the weak self and becoming psychologically indestructible also involves developing what could be called outcome independence, the ability to take action toward your goals without being emotionally attached to specific results. The weak self is often paralyzed by fear of rejection, failure, or judgment, leading to inaction or half-hearted efforts that guarantee mediocre results. Marcus learned to approach challenges, including romantic pursuits, with full effort but without desperate attachment to particular outcomes. If he was interested in someone, he would express that interest clearly and directly, but without the neediness that comes from believing his happiness depended on their response. This outcome independence paradoxically made success more likely because it eliminated the desperate energy that tends to repel others. This principle extends beyond romantic relationships to all areas of life. When you can pursue goals with full commitment but without attachment to specific results, you become more creative, persistent, and resilient. You're willing to take calculated risks because failure doesn't threaten your core sense of worth. This attitude naturally attracts others because confidence and resilience are universally appealing qualities. Part 2. The Psychology of Attraction and Influence. The second phase of Marcus's transformation involved understanding the deeper psychological principles that govern human attraction and social dynamics. This wasn't about learning manipulative tactics or pick-up artist techniques, but about comprehending the fundamental human needs and drives that influence how people respond to each other. One of the most important realizations was that attraction, particularly for women, operates on multiple levels simultaneously: physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. While physical attraction might create initial interest, it's the other levels that create the kind of deep fascination and obsession that the weak self desperately seeks but can never achieve through superficial means. The concept of dominance that attracts women isn't the crude, aggressive dominance that insecure men often display, but rather what could be called benevolent dominance or natural leadership. This is the quality displayed by individuals who naturally take charge of situations, not because they need to prove their worth, but because they genuinely care about outcomes and have the competence to guide others toward positive results. Marcus observed this dynamic in various contexts: at work, in social groups, and in romantic situations. The men who naturally attracted the most positive attention from women weren't necessarily the loudest or most aggressive, but they were the ones who could remain calm under pressure, make decisions when others were paralyzed by uncertainty, and take responsibility for the well-being of their group. This natural leadership emerges from the inner work described in the first part. When you've developed emotional sovereignty, genuine competence, and principled living, you naturally become someone others look to for guidance and stability. This isn't about dominating others through force or manipulation, but about becoming the kind of person others naturally want to follow and be around. The psychology behind why this quality is attractive, particularly to women, relates to fundamental human needs for security and growth. Throughout human history, survival and thriving have required individuals who could remain calm in crisis, make good decisions under pressure, and protect and provide for their group. These qualities are still deeply attractive because they signal someone who can be a stable, reliable partner in life's challenges. However, this leadership must be coupled with what could be called emotional intelligence and genuine care for others' well-being. Dominance without empathy becomes tyranny, which is ultimately repulsive to psychologically healthy individuals. The most attractive form of strength is that which is used in service of others rather than at their expense. Marcus learned to express this benevolent dominance through small, everyday actions. When dining with friends, he would naturally take charge of making reservations and ensuring everyone was comfortable. When conflicts arose in his social circle, he would facilitate conversations that led to resolution rather than simply taking sides or avoiding involvement. When someone seemed troubled, he would offer genuine support without trying to fix everything for them. These behaviors weren't calculated to impress anyone. They flowed naturally from his transformed character, but they had a profound effect on how others, particularly women, perceived and responded to him. They began seeking his advice, inviting him to events, and showing clear signs of romantic interest. This wasn't because he was manipulating them, but because he had become genuinely attractive through his character development. Another crucial aspect of attraction psychology involves understanding what might be called emotional stimulation. The weak self often tries to attract others by being agreeable, predictable, and safe. While these qualities aren't negative, they also don't create the kind of emotional engagement that leads to fascination and strong attraction. The transformed self, however, naturally creates emotional stimulation through unpredictability, challenge, and depth. This doesn't mean being difficult or playing games, but rather being complex enough that others can't easily categorize or predict you. Marcus discovered that by pursuing his own interests passionately, maintaining his principles even when inconvenient, and expressing his authentic thoughts even when they were unexpected, he became far more intriguing to others. This principle works because humans are naturally drawn to mystery and challenge. We tend to value what we have to work for more than what's freely given. And we're more interested in people we can't immediately understand completely. The weak self and its desperation to be liked often reveals everything about itself immediately and tries to make things as easy as possible for others. This removes all mystery and challenge, leading to rapid loss of interest. The key is creating this emotional stimulation through authenticity rather than artificial means. When you're genuinely complex, passionate about your pursuits, and unwilling to compromise your principles for approval, you naturally become intriguing. Others sense there are depths to you they haven't yet explored, and this creates a desire to invest more time and energy in understanding you. This dynamic is particularly powerful in romantic contexts because it creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the most powerful form of psychological conditioning. When someone can't predict exactly how you'll respond or what you'll do next, within the bounds of your consistent character and principles, each interaction becomes more emotionally significant and memorable. However, this unpredictability must be rooted in genuine character rather than manipulation. The difference is that authentic unpredictability comes from being true to your complex, evolving self, while manipulative unpredictability involves calculating what response will create the desired effect. The first is sustainable and deepens relationships. The second is exhausting and ultimately destructive. The transformed individual also understands the importance of what might be called social proof and pre-selection. These concepts, while sometimes misused by those seeking to manipulate others, reflect real psychological phenomena that can be leveraged ethically through genuine self-development. Social proof refers to the tendency for people to find others more attractive when they see evidence that other people also find them attractive. Pre-selection is the related concept that individuals who are already chosen by others appear more desirable. These dynamics exist because they serve as mental shortcuts for evaluating potential partners. If others have validated someone's worth, it suggests they possess valuable qualities that might not be immediately apparent. Marcus found that as he developed himself and became more attractive to some people, this naturally created a positive feedback loop where others became more interested in him as well. Women who might have overlooked him previously began noticing him when they saw that other women enjoyed his company and sought his attention. The key to leveraging these dynamics ethically is to focus on actually becoming the kind of person others naturally want to be around, rather than trying to fake social proof through manipulation. When you're genuinely developing yourself and building meaningful relationships, social proof occurs naturally as a byproduct rather than as a calculated strategy. This might involve building friendships with interesting, attractive people of all genders, participating in social activities where you can demonstrate your positive qualities, and generally becoming someone others genuinely enjoy spending time with. The goal isn't to use these people to attract romantic partners, but to build a rich social life that reflects your actual worth as a person. The concept of frame control is another important element of social psychology that the transformed individual understands and applies. Frame control refers to the ability to maintain your interpretation of reality and social dynamics even when others are trying to impose their frame on the situation. This isn't about being stubborn or refusing to consider other perspectives, but about having enough inner strength to maintain your principles and perspective under social pressure. The weak self often adopts whatever frame others present, leading to inconsistent behavior and loss of respect. If someone suggests that his standards are too high, he lowers them. If someone implies that his boundaries are unreasonable, he abandons them. This frame-shifting behavior signals to others that he lacks conviction and can be easily influenced. The transformed individual, however, maintains frame control by consistently operating from his developed principles and perspective. If someone suggests he's being too picky in his romantic choices, he might respond that he's being appropriately selective because he values quality relationships. If someone tries to make him feel guilty for maintaining boundaries, he remains calm and explains why those boundaries serve everyone's best interests. This frame control is particularly attractive to women because it signals psychological strength and reliability. Many women have experienced relationships with men who were easily swayed by peer pressure, family opinions, or social expectations, leading to instability and disappointment. A man who can maintain his frame while still being open to input and growth represents the kind of stability many seek in a partner. The psychology of scarcity versus abundance also plays a crucial role in attraction dynamics. The weak self operates from scarcity, believing that opportunities for connection, love, and fulfillment are rare and must be desperately pursued and clung to. This scarcity mindset creates needy, clingy behavior that is universally unattractive. The transformed individual operates from abundance, recognizing that while quality relationships are valuable, There are multiple potential paths to fulfillment and happiness. This abundance mindset allows for relaxed, confident behavior that doesn't pressure others or make them feel like they're being desperately pursued. Marcus discovered that this shift from scarcity to abundance thinking changed everything about his romantic interactions. Instead of trying to convince women to like him, he focused on determining whether they were genuinely compatible with his values and goals. Instead of fearing rejection, he began to see it as valuable information that helped him avoid investing time in unsuitable matches. This abundance mindset isn't about being cavalier or dismissive of others' feelings, but about approaching relationships from a position of strength rather than desperation. It allows for genuine choice and selectivity, which paradoxically makes you more attractive because people sense you have options and are choosing them specifically rather than settling for anyone who will have you. Understanding the role of challenge and pursuit in attraction psychology is also crucial. Humans naturally value what they have to work for more than what's freely given. This doesn't mean playing games or being difficult, but it does mean not making things too easy or removing all challenge from the interaction. The weak self often tries to remove all obstacles and make everything as convenient as possible for the object of their interest. They're always available, always agreeable, and always accommodating. While these behaviors might seem kind and considerate, they actually remove the psychological engagement that creates strong attraction. The transformed individual, while still being genuinely kind and considerate, maintains enough of his own agenda and standards that others have to invest some effort to gain his full attention and approval. This isn't about being deliberately difficult, but about having a life rich enough that others must earn their place in it rather than being automatically granted unlimited access. Part 3. Practical application and sustainable relationships. The final phase of Marcus's transformation involved translating his inner development and understanding of attraction psychology into practical behaviors that created meaningful, lasting relationships. This wasn't about temporary conquest or shallow validation, but about building the kind of deep connections that enhance both partners' lives over the long term. The first principle he learned was that sustainable attraction requires ongoing growth and development from both parties. The weak self often believes that once they've won someone's interest, the work is done and they can relax into complacency. This leads to the gradual erosion of attraction as both people stop growing and challenging each other. The transformed individual recognizes that attraction is dynamic and must be continually renewed through ongoing personal development, shared experiences, and mutual challenge. This doesn't mean constantly trying to impress or prove yourself, but rather maintaining the qualities that made you attractive in the first place, while continuing to evolve and grow. Marcus made it a practice to regularly set new goals, learn new skills, and pursue challenging experiences, not because he thought this would impress anyone, but because he recognized that stagnation is the enemy of both personal fulfillment and interpersonal attraction. Women who initially were drawn to his confidence and competence remained interested because those qualities continued to manifest in new areas of life. This commitment to growth also extended to his understanding of relationships themselves. He studied psychology, communication techniques, and emotional intelligence not to manipulate others but to become a better partner and friend. He learned to listen more effectively, communicate his needs clearly, and navigate conflicts constructively. The practice of masculine leadership in relationships became a central theme of his approach. This doesn't refer to outdated gender stereotypes or authoritarian behavior, but rather to taking responsibility for creating positive relationship dynamics and experiences. This might involve planning interesting dates, initiating difficult but necessary conversations, or taking the lead in resolving conflicts. This leadership style is attractive to many women because it relieves them of the burden of always being the one to plan, initiate, and manage the emotional dynamics of the relationship. However, this leadership must be exercised with genuine care for their partner's well-being and preferences, not as a way to control or dominate. Marcus learned to express this leadership through both large and small gestures. He would plan elaborate surprises for special occasions, but also handle small daily decisions that relieved his partner of mental load. He would initiate conversations about relationship goals and challenges, but also respect his partner's autonomy and input in all decisions that affected them both. The concept of emotional leadership became particularly important. This involves maintaining emotional stability and strength during challenging times, helping to regulate the emotional climate of the relationship, and providing security through consistent, principled behavior. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or being stoic, but rather being the steady presence that others can rely on during turbulent times. Many women find this emotional leadership deeply attractive because it allows them to feel safe expressing their own emotions and vulnerabilities. When someone trusts that their partner won't become reactive or unstable in response to their feelings, they're more likely to open up and create the kind of intimate connection that both partners crave. However, this emotional leadership must be balanced with emotional intelligence and empathy. The goal isn't to dismiss or manage other people's emotions, but to provide a stable foundation from which they can be safely experienced and processed. This requires the ability to remain calm and compassionate, even when confronted with intense emotions from others. The practice of strategic vulnerability also became an important aspect of Marcus's relationship approach. While the weak self is either completely closed off or inappropriately oversharing, the transformed individual learns to share vulnerabilities in ways that deepen connection without creating burden or loss of respect. Strategic vulnerability involves sharing personal struggles, fears, and uncertainties at appropriate times and in appropriate ways. This might mean discussing past challenges that have contributed to your growth, sharing current concerns about important decisions, or admitting when you don't have all the answers. The key is that these admissions come from a position of strength rather than neediness. This vulnerability is attractive because it allows others to see your humanity and creates opportunities for deeper connection. However, it must be balanced with overall strength and competence. Vulnerability shared by someone who is generally capable and self-possessed has a completely different effect than vulnerability expressed by someone who seems generally weak or overwhelmed. The timing and context of vulnerable sharing is crucial. Early in relationships, vulnerability should be limited to things that demonstrate growth and resilience rather than ongoing problems or neediness. As relationships deepen and trust develops, more significant vulnerabilities can be shared as part of building intimate connection. Understanding the difference between attraction and comfort became another crucial insight. Many people, particularly those operating from the weak self, believe that making others comfortable is the key to attraction. While comfort is important for long-term relationship success, attraction often requires some degree of challenge and unpredictability. The most successful relationships combine both elements: enough attraction to maintain interest and passion, and enough comfort to build trust and security. Marcus learned to calibrate his behavior to provide both, creating excitement through his ambition, principles, and unpredictability while also providing security through his reliability, care, and emotional stability. This might involve being willing to disagree respectfully about important issues while also being consistently supportive of his partner's goals and dreams. It could mean maintaining some independence and mystery while also being emotionally available and communicative. The goal is to avoid becoming so comfortable that passion dies or so challenging that security is threatened. The practice of outcome independence proved crucial in maintaining healthy relationship dynamics. While it's natural to care deeply about someone and want the relationship to succeed, becoming overly attached to specific outcomes often creates the kind of pressure and neediness that undermines attraction. Marcus learned to invest fully in his relationships while also maintaining the inner security that came from knowing he would be fine regardless of what happened. This wasn't about being uncaring or preparing for failure, but about loving from a position of abundance rather than scarcity. This outcome independence allowed him to address problems directly, rather than avoiding them out of fear that conflict might end the relationship. It enabled him to maintain his standards and boundaries even when it might be inconvenient. Most importantly, it allowed his partners to feel free to be themselves without worrying that their authentic expression might drive him away. The principle of adding value became a central focus of how Marcus approached all his relationships. Rather than focusing on what he could get from others, he concentrated on what he could contribute to their lives and well-being. This shift from a taking mindset to a giving mindset fundamentally changed how others perceived and responded to him. Adding value might involve using his skills and knowledge to help solve problems, introducing people to opportunities or connections that could benefit them, or simply providing emotional support and encouragement during challenging times. The key was that this value-adding behavior flowed from genuine care, rather than from expectation of reciprocal benefit. This approach is attractive because most people are accustomed to others wanting something from them rather than genuinely seeking to contribute to their well-being. When someone consistently adds value to your life without keeping score or expecting immediate reciprocation, it creates both gratitude and desire to reciprocate, leading to positive relationship dynamics. However, this value-adding must be done from a position of strength rather than people-pleasing. The difference is that strong people add value because they have abundance to share, while weak people add value because they hope it will make others like them. The first creates attraction, the second creates obligation and eventual resentment. The development of social intelligence became another crucial skill. This involves reading social situations accurately, understanding group dynamics, and knowing how to interact effectively with different types of people in various contexts. While some people are naturally socially intelligent, these skills can be developed through conscious practice and observation. Marcus spent time studying how charismatic and well-liked people behaved in social situations. He noticed that they tended to make others feel heard and valued. They could adapt their communication style to their audience, and they had a knack for bringing out the best in people. These weren't manipulative techniques, but genuine skills that enhanced everyone's social experience. Developing social intelligence involved learning to read nonverbal cues, understanding how to tell engaging stories, knowing when to speak and when to listen, and being able to navigate social hierarchies without being obsequious or aggressive. These skills are attractive because they indicate someone who can be a valuable social partner and who won't create embarrassment or conflict in group settings. The concept of maintaining mystery while still being open and authentic proved to be a delicate balance that required ongoing attention. The weak self often believes that complete transparency and availability are attractive, while the transformed individual understands that some degree of mystery and independence maintains interest and prevents relationships from becoming stagnant. Maintaining mystery doesn't involve dishonesty or playing games, but rather having a rich enough life that you always have new experiences, thoughts, and developments to share. It means not being completely predictable in your responses and maintaining some independent pursuits and friendships that don't involve your romantic partner. This mystery is maintained through continued growth, having diverse interests and relationships, and not sharing every thought and experience immediately. It's about being genuinely complex and evolving rather than being an open book that can be read completely in the first few interactions. The balance between masculine and feminine energies within oneself also proved important for creating sustainable attraction. While maintaining primarily masculine energy, goal-oriented, decisive, protective, Marcus learned to also access his feminine energy, intuitive, creative, emotionally expressive, when appropriate. This balance made him more attractive to women because it demonstrated emotional range and depth while still maintaining the core masculine qualities that many women find attractive in male partners. It allowed for more dynamic and interesting interactions because he could match different energies depending on what was needed in the moment. However, this required careful calibration because too much feminine energy could undermine attraction while too little could prevent deeper emotional connection. The key was maintaining masculine as the dominant energy while being able to access feminine when it would enhance connection or understanding. The practice of sexual leadership became another important aspect of creating the kind of obsessive attraction described in the title. This doesn't refer to dominance in a crude sense, but rather to taking confident leadership in creating and maintaining sexual attraction and intimacy. Many men, particularly those operating from the weak self, are hesitant to express sexual interest directly or take leadership in physical escalation. This hesitation often stems from fear of rejection or concern about being inappropriate. However, women often find this hesitation frustrating because it forces them to take responsibility for sexual escalation or leaves them uncertain about the man's level of interest. Marcus learned to express sexual interest clearly and confidently while still being respectful of boundaries and consent. This might involve direct but tasteful compliments about physical attraction, appropriate physical touch that escalates gradually, or clear communication about desires and intentions. This sexual leadership is attractive because it demonstrates confidence and removes ambiguity from the interaction. Women can relax into their feminine energy when they trust that the man will take appropriate leadership in physical escalation, while still respecting their boundaries and comfort level. The importance of lifestyle design in maintaining long-term attraction became another key insight. The weak self often builds their entire life around their romantic relationship, abandoning other interests and relationships once they find a partner. This creates pressure on the relationship to fulfill all needs and often leads to loss of attraction, as both partners become less interesting versions of themselves. The transformed individual maintains a rich, fulfilling life that includes diverse interests, meaningful friendships, challenging goals, and personal pursuits. This lifestyle design ensures that they remain interesting and attractive, while also preventing the relationship from becoming stagnant or codependent. This doesn't mean neglecting the relationship or being unavailable to your partner, but rather maintaining the full, rich life that made you attractive in the first place. It means continuing to grow, challenge yourself, and pursue your goals, while also prioritizing the relationship appropriately. Finally, the practice of conscious relationship building involves deliberately developing the skills and habits that create lasting, fulfilling partnerships. This includes learning effective communication techniques, understanding how to navigate conflicts constructively, developing emotional intelligence, and regularly investing in the relationship's growth and development. Marcus studied successful long-term relationships and identified the patterns that characterized them. He noticed that successful couples maintained individual growth while also growing together. They handled conflicts as opportunities for understanding rather than battles to be won, and they regularly invested time and energy in maintaining romance and connection. This conscious approach to relationship building is attractive because it demonstrates someone who takes relationships seriously and has the skills to make them successful. It shows that you're not just focused on the initial attraction phase, but are also prepared to do the ongoing work that creates lasting partnership. The result of this comprehensive transformation, from destroying the weak self through developing attraction psychology understanding to practical relationship building, created what others perceived as natural charisma and magnetic presence. Women found Marcus genuinely fascinating not because he was employing techniques or strategies, but because he had become someone genuinely worth being fascinated by. The obsession that developed wasn't unhealthy fixation, but rather the natural result of encountering someone who combined strength with vulnerability, leadership with empathy, mystery with authenticity, and challenge with comfort. These combinations are rare enough that when women encountered them in Marcus, they naturally wanted to invest more time and energy in understanding and connecting with him. Most importantly, the relationships that developed from this foundation were mutually beneficial and sustainable. Rather than being based on manipulation or artificial attraction, they were rooted in genuine compatibility, shared values, and authentic connection. The women who became deeply interested in Marcus did so because he genuinely added value to their lives and because the connection felt natural and growth-promoting for both parties. The transformation from weak to strong, from needy to abundant, from reactive to responsive, created a positive spiral where success built upon success. As Marcus became more attractive, he had more options, which made him more selective, which made him more attractive to higher quality partners. This upward spiral continued as long as he maintained his commitment to growth, authenticity, and adding value to others' lives. The true test of this transformation wasn't whether it created temporary attraction or short-term success, but whether it led to the kind of deep, meaningful relationships that enhance both partners' lives over the long term. By focusing on becoming genuinely attractive rather than temporarily impressive, Marcus built the foundation for the kind of lasting partnership that represents the ultimate success of this approach to personal development and relationship building.